Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning into our webinar, Internal Carbon Pricing, Practical Experiences from the Private Sector. Before we get started, we have two housekeeping items to announce. One is on the software's question and answer functionality, and the second is a note from our lawyers. First, this webinar series is designed to be an open, interactive conversation, and you are invited to submit your questions via the Q&A function at any point during this event. You can find the Q&A in the menu bar at the top of your screen. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to address every question submitted today, but will answer as many as possible. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available online. Second, we would like to draw your attention to the following statement, which is being displayed on your screen, and I will read now. Throughout this webinar series, participants shall comply with competition law requirements and shall not enter into any discussion, activity, or conduct that may infringe any applicable competition law. By way of example, participants shall not discuss, communicate, or exchange any commercially sensitive information, including non-public information relating to prices, marketing, and advertising strategy, costs and revenues, strategy in relation to decisions on internal project screening values, trading terms and conditions with third parties, including purchasing strategy, terms of supply, trade, or distribution strategy. This applies not only to discussions during formal meetings, but also to informal discussions before, during, and after meetings. Should the meeting discuss matters that contravene competition law requirements, it is the responsibility of participants to notify the moderator, who will discontinue the discussion or close the meeting. Many thanks for your attention. Now we are pleased to welcome Hector Gomez-Ang, Brazil Country Manager at IFC, who will moderate this webinar.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I just wanted to maybe continue some sort of very quick housekeeping rules and put some of the context here. I want to thank the participants that have agreed to be here. Mr. Luis Osorio, Vice President at CPFL, one of the largest energy distribution companies in Brazil. Fabio Guido is part of the sustainability group at Brazil's largest private bank, Itaú Unibanco, and Vivian McKnight, who's a climate change advisor at the mining company Vale. The idea is really to have to discuss, and there's a lot happening in Brazil right now. It's been happening for a while, and together with the organizer, we thought it would be good to catch up on some of the interesting stuff that Brazilian companies are doing in the realm of carbon pricing, right? Internal carbon pricing. Particularly discuss also an ETS sort of experience or platform being developed. But before we go to carbon pricing, what's part of why these companies are discussing carbon pricing, I would like to maybe take the conversation and ask the participants to talk about, on one hand, why is it that Brazilian companies have, in a remarkable way, embraced the case for sustainability? I think that's something that we would like to hear your views as big as having leadership positions in your companies. And then also discuss as to, how is it that your companies became interested in carbon pricing and what are the business drivers? So tell us a little bit about experience in carbon pricing before we go to another round. I wanted to encourage participants to please send their questions. We will try to address them all during the conversation or towards the end. But if I see the need and not to lose the continuity of the conversation, I may include some of your questions. Okay, so I would ask now Luis Osorio from CPFL to maybe start to start his presentation. I think maybe 3 to 5 minutes would be good, so we can keep check on time. Thanks, Luis.
Thank you very much, Hector. It's a wonderful. First of all, hello to everyone. It's wonderful to be here today, and it's important to highlight that Brazil is a country of great business opportunities related to sustainability. The country has seen an increase in the share of renewable energies in the energy matrix, such as wind, biomass, or of sugarcane, which already account for about 15% of domestic electricity supply. In the coming years, solar energy should have strong growth in Brazil. So it's important, for CPFL as the, a leader private company in Brazil to highlight the importance of sustainability, not only for the private sector, but also for the government per se. Just to give an example, the National Electric Energy Agency predicts that by 2024, I would say around 1.2 million prosumers who will exchange their own energy to the grid. In the last 2 years, generation capacity has grown by 70%. By 2030, it should account for 10% of energy matrix. So giving you these highlights from the energy sector, I would like to assure that the Brazilian economy and its companies should care and should be accountable for the sustainable use of natural resources for the transition to a low carbon economy, while of course increasing our competitiveness in the international markets.
Great. Thanks, Luis. Maybe if I can turn to Vivian and maybe we can tell us a little bit about the view from Vale as to engage this sustainability the fully embracing the concept of sustainability, and then we'll take it from there.
Yes, sure. So hello everybody, it's a pleasure to be here. I work for Vale for 7 years now. And as you may know, Vale is a global mining company. We are present in more than 26 countries. And sustainability is one of our strategic pillars. So it's very important for Vale to be on track on that. We publish our sustainability report for 10 years now. So we are celebrating 10 years of publication. And climate change is a very material issue inside our strategy of sustainability. So as Luis Osório already said, Brazil has a very strategic position regarding the energy because we have our energy matrix very clean. But when we look for the perspective of a mining industry, for example, which we are a very energy intensive industry, despite the fact that more than 75% of our energy matrix, for instance, comes from renewable, the main source of our GHG emission is still related to fossil fuel consumption. So we are aware that climate change is a strategic pillar for us, and we work on that. And there is also a lot of international and stakeholders asking us about it. There is an international pressure for companies to involve and include sustainability in the core processes. And I think that those are the main drivers.
Thank you. I think it's interesting to have the view from a company that has a purely domestic, very strong domestic presence, and one with a global company, and you could see most of the drivers are related. So that's good. I know Itaú is having some troubles connecting, so I will stay with you, and maybe Luis, you can tell us a little bit about the let's go into carbon pricing now. You can tell us a little bit as to how did CPFL become interested in carbon pricing, and what has been the story so far before we at some point later on we can discuss about the ETS. But I wanted to know really go into the concept of carbon pricing within CPFL.
Fantastic. Following our mission and vision, the CPFL Group believes that the longevity of our beings and the future of humanity are increasingly dependent on the balance between the pursuit of economic results and the ability of society to nurture and support growth. Carbon pricing approach started with the opportunity to sell carbon credits after the Kyoto Protocol. which was internalized as one of the company's drivers. Also, I may say that CPFL Group is already considering the pricing of carbon in its business plans in anticipation of an eventual regulated market for carbon in Brazil. It's really important. That's something that I addressed in the last CPLC meeting. Also like to take the opportunity to highlight our commitment to CPLC and the Corridors Initiative. But I may say that following this scenario, the company evaluates the risks and opportunities to establish a corporate portfolio. We already have internal carbon pricing that we consider in our projects, and we believe that's the way to be.
Good. And maybe what I thought is so this is, I mean, just trying to drill down a little bit, and I don't know if I know you probably had some slides. I don't know if you're going to use them or not, but I think now would be a good time if it's related to this question. But so I mean, this is a long term, it's a marathon, right? It's not it's been happening for a few years. And do you see a change or an acceleration of this effort in the past, let's put it, 2 years, since 2015, or really you guys are in a long-term plan and it's continued the same pace? Is it just
first of all, absolutely, it's a long-term. It's a marathon. It's not a 100 meters run. I would say that not only here in the CPFL environment, but also in the other environments that I participated. In Brazil, in the Brazilian business society, I would say that the awareness is growing, and I hear more oftenly that the importance of having carbon pricing or increasing carbon pricing, it's key in this process. Picking a little bit on your question, I would say in terms of business drivers. It's important to say that CPFL is a board member of UN Global Compact and a leader to promoting the best practice on the SDGs in the Brazilian power sector. I would say that our strategic plan, is committed to this smart cities, low carbon economy, electricity mobility. In its pursuit of excellence in management of short-term, medium and long-term topics of greatest relevance, the company CPFL definitely has operated a sustainability platform for its business. This sustainability tool is integrated with the group's strategic planning, and it's based on 5 pillars: climate change, relationship with communities, health and safety, supplier development, people management, and reverse logistics. So I would say all these pillars are really embedded in the company's culture, in our way of doing business, and I think that's really present in the decision-making process of the company. So I would say that these pillars, as also mentioning what Vivian just said, are really key in the corporate world, in the Brazilian market. And I would say that carbon pricing, it's now a reality in our companies.
Thank you. Thanks, Blaise. Vivian, let's turn it to you. And it's pretty much, I mean, if you can describe some of the efforts that Vale has undertaken, the experience with carbon pricing. And I wanted to pick on one area that Luis brought up, which is, how is it, if you are, that Vale is using carbon pricing or plans to use carbon pricing in some of the decision making, right? So please go ahead.
Yes. I think there is a growing international momentum. I know that carbon pricing is no new discussion. It's being discussed a lot, even more in the academy. Universities were working on valuation of resources as carbon pricing is an economic mechanism to include an externality in the economic dynamic. So companies are discussing this for a long time, but I think that since the climate summit in 2014 and all the preparation for the Paris COP of UNFCCC, there is a growing international momentum about carbon pricing. There's a lot of pressure for companies to start discussing how to include this as an internal process, as a part of a business strategy as well. So we had the World Bank's positioning letter that was sent to a lot of countries and companies asking us to position ourselves regarding carbon pricing. We have a lot of international initiatives from investor perspective, for example, like the task force on climate-related financial disclosure, which is also another guiding for companies to understand that carbon pricing should be already be part of our business. And as a global company, we have experienced a lot of different carbon pricing reality. We have a regulatory framework that is very different depending on the region. So we lived with a carbon tax in Australia for 3-4 years. And it was one of the biggest financial impact for a company in terms of carbon pricing, because the price was very high compared to the other parts of the other countries that did not have the price. We already have some international experience in the UK, which we have been part of a carbon pricing mechanism since 10 years by now. Now we have experienced Ontario mechanism in Canada, which have a emission trading scheme, which is very interesting and very related to the simulation that we are doing in Brazil. So one of the main positive points of being part of the simulation in Brazil is that we have a lot of knowledge already about how to operate in a trading market, which is very interesting. And also we are following very close the Brazilian evolution discussion about the carbon pricing. And since Brazil is now part of the partnership for market readiness of the World Bank, we are also working a lot with governments and other institutions to analyze what should be the better carbon pricing in terms of technical aspects for Brazil. So in Vale, we had already piloted a carbon pricing mechanism for investment decision, including a shadow price for capital projects. And we are now working with the construction of a more complete model to understand what are the total costs involved in terms of carbon pricing for a mining company. Because we were analyzing recently within our risk management process that maybe the scope 1 emissions will not be the main issue for a mining company, for example, because it is still small compared to the rest of the emissions in our value chain. So we are analyzing not only the direct costs related to carbon pricing, but also the indirect costs related to the energy and fuel purchase, and also the impact that it may have in the supply chain contracts. So that's pretty much what we have been working with in Vale to define internal carbon pricing for all operations. And we think that this is a very useful tool, and I would like to phrase this, because carbon pricing for companies, we understand as a tool to help companies to achieve broader objectives.
Thanks, thanks, Viviana. I think it's a very, very interesting story on how you have been using. Luis, just a heads up. I'm gonna go back to you to ask whether some of the stuff that Vivian mentioned, like shadow pricing and so on, whether it's being used at CPFL. But before I do that, I understand that Fabio from Itaú Unibanco is now online. And if that being the case, I would like to ask him, very quickly to describe sort of the efforts and the work that Itaú Unibanco has been doing in terms of internal carbon pricing. So we level the conversation and then we discuss about the ETS. Fabio, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Could you listen me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, we have a little technical problems here, so I'm using the telephone for this webinar. Well, here in Itaú, because of the simulator, we discovered that more important than have a carbon pricing is to have governance of climate change inside the organization. If we look for the financial sector, our impact, because we exist, is not so relevant, but the impact of our emissions financed is very high and very relevant. So we separate in three different units or business units here. The financial, the credit that we are doing in the market, the investment, and the operation. And in each unit, we work in a different way. For example, in operational side, we have an area called the investment office that look at many metrics when decide to do a new project or to invest in a new project. And this metric is very traditional as payback, net present value, and coherence with our strategy. And now we are looking at and working to include the variable of carbon emissions in these metrics. Carbon pricing is our most specific activity and can be used also in investment to calculate, for example, in investment side, to calculate the fair price of the assets with bonus or penalties that came in from the carbon emission shocked by the price, the company prices or the asset price or the project price when we consider the carbon emissions. In credit, for example, is very important for us to analyze the exposition of the bank by sector and by carbon emissions to understand the possibility of default that come because of some taxation or because of some barrier that came from carbon emissions. So as a bank, we have different ways to look for these problems. And we are inside many different working groups with Brazilian Federation of Banks, with the UNEP-FI, and with the Financial Stability Board, who recommended to disclosure the climate risks and the opportunities toward to a new economy, to a green economy.
Thanks, Fabio. Let me, since I have you there, I would like to ask you a question. So one of the, I mean, if I had to summarize, and I don't want to oversimplify, it's really a risk management tool, the way when it's one of the main approach that seems that you're following. But have you at Itaú Unibanco done anything in like shadow pricing or any of this, or how long have you been working on this? I wanted to have some perspective on the long-term effort that this has taken.
Well, in the investment, for example, in the investment side, we are for quite some time we are looking for the price of carbon inside our assets and how to integrate this dimension of environmental issue in the price of the companies and the assets. So this is we adopt a carbon internal price, and we shocked our prices with this. But each area, each business unit has different ways to measure and to use this kind of pricing, because each unit is different in their strategy of internalize the carbon pricing in Itaú Unibanco. So, for example, when we look for the portfolio of credit, we use some metrics different from the way we look for the investment side, and it's different from the way we look to the operational side. So for a long time, we have our own methodology to integrate environmental, social, and corporate issues into corporate evaluations, and climate change is one of these dimensions. And the price of the carbon, according to the sector, according to the emissions that the sector has, we have another perspective from the exposition in the sector.
Thanks. Luis, I wanted to get back to you and ask whether you're using any of these tools or using any like shadow pricing, or is there like Itaú has a different approach to each by business unit, each one uses it differently. How is it done at CPFL? I wanted to ask you.
Well, yes, we do have different approaches, of course, depending on the business unit and the kind of business that we are in. So, yes, speaking on that, we have different approaches. Also like to say that as the largest renewable energy company in Latin America, understanding that the effects of studies and application of carbon pricing in our own business strategy favor the investment and development of disruptive technologies such as electric mobility and storage. So again, CPFL is an integrated holding company. We have different and very diverse kind of business, from commercialization of energy, services, distribution, transmission, generation. So we take different approaches in each of these business in order to better evaluate the impact and to better price the carbon footprint in your business.
Thank you. I wanted to move to. We have some questions here, and we'll get to those. Thanks for those that are posting questions. But I wanted to go to the ETS simulation and get your views. I mean, we have a group of companies that have basically decided to voluntarily cap emissions and test carbon markets. I wanted to get the perspective, and maybe I'll start with Vivian on I think you explained part of it in your previous intervention on why is it that Vale is doing it, but specifically the ETS effort. How is it? What is the driver inside Vale, and what is it that you have learned from the experience so far? And is this something that is affecting investment on operational decisions, or you expect that it will impact? If you could address those.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to note is that the ETS simulation is being developed by the FGV, which is a university that has a lot of discussions of climate change and sustainability in the past years. So we have already a group of companies discussing a lot of issues. And one of the initiatives that we agreed to try was to test the simulation, to create an ETS simulation. So that was the first information, that it was some natural process to be involved on that. And also a great opportunity for companies to understand better what would mean for us a carbon pricing, because we would have academy discussion with other companies to understand what is happening in other companies worldwide and what could it mean for us. And it was also a good opportunity for us to help to construct and also to understand the important elements of a carbon pricing mechanism. So we analyzed the difference between the trading scheme and tax, and how important it is to have a MRV system before we have an economic valuation or carbon pricing mechanism. And as you said, Brazil already have a very robust public registry, voluntary of emissions. So a voluntary registry of emissions. So due to that, we were able to develop the ETS simulation. And I think that one of the main lessons learned from them is that the carbon pricing, it's not the end, it's a tool to achieve a greater objective. And it's very important for a company to understand what is the greater objective and how you're going to use this tool. And also we learned that from the government perspective and from the perspective of a mechanism to regulate emissions, theoretically, it does not make too much difference if it's going to be a tax or an ETS. So there is not a better mechanism. All of them have pros and cons. So we need to analyze all of them and to understand better what would be more suitable for the country.
Okay, we will get back to public policy issues. I wanted to ask maybe Luis, you want to add anything on the ETS experience on the ETS project, and what's your view or CPFL's view, and then I will go to Fabio also to complete that.
In a very straightforward way, I would say that joining the ETS simulation helps to develop carbon pricing awareness and its benefits. So establishing and incorporating this process among the business units, as I mentioned before, so that they can internalize in their activities and reflect on the main business strategy. So that's the main reason I would say that why we joined the ETS simulation.
Thank you. And Fabio, you want any views on the please on the ETS simulation and from the perspective of Itaú?
Yeah, for us, adding some comments in this very rich commentary, the simulation allows to operate and compare the behavior of assets when we adopt some price or some simulation of taxation or credit market. It's important because to help us to anticipate what is to come and reflect our actions and decisions today that can completely affect our business. We are also aware of our role as a financial and capital market agent in encouraging the necessary transition to a low carbon economy, and this just happen when we measure for example, the carbon emissions of all the clients or all the projects we are involved directly or indirectly by investing or by doing some credit in this economic activities. So for us, it's an opportunity to know better how we can use an internal carbon pricing and deepen our vision of risk-taking and opportunities in this new economy.
Thank you, Fabio. We have a series of questions that I wanted to address because I think it will help. There is a request from several viewers on trying to understand the mechanics around this, and I mean basically two items. One is whether for this internal carbon pricing are the different companies are addressing, is there real money being transferred among business units, or is really sort of a shadow account keeping? That would be one, and the second question for the ETS simulation. Are you also? I mean, this is. Are you transferring real money among companies, or is also a theoretical exercise? I don't know. Vivian, Luis, Fabio, whoever wants to address this.
I can start, and my colleagues can complement. So we are not using real money. We created a specific money which we call epicents for the simulation. So there is no real cash flow running from one company to another, and we receive an initial allocation of emissions of allowances based on a benchmark by sector, and we also receive an amount of this created money to work with in the simulation. So that's, I think, answer the questions.
Luis, Fabio, you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, from the side of Itaú, we are working with the theoretical portfolio currently, looking for the behavior of our portfolio when we use the carbon price, and what is the difference between the traditional way and the way use it with the carbon pricing. But when we go to for example, investment side, we are now using the carbon pricing to evaluate the company. So we are showing for the managers that maybe the price of the company, the price of the asset is not only composed by the financial metrics, but because of the carbon pricing, the company can be penalized or can have a bonus because of their sector activity. So we have both views of this problem.
Great, thank you.
If I may add, I agree with my colleagues, but one lesson learned here in this process is that the experience resulting from the participation of ETS simulation have shown important lessons for all companies, I would say. The generation of scenarios with the incorporation of carbon price into business and process strategies contributes to a new mindset of decision making and generation of new opportunities. I think that's very important to highlight here.
Absolutely, it's yeah, there's the cultural and the mindset issue. If it was that, it's we all need to change and adjust. Before we move on, because I wanted to touch on the public policy side, the views from that you have. But before that, there are a couple of questions that I wanted to address before, so we don't get to keep things consistent. They're addressed to, actually, two of them are addressed to Vivian. So I mean, feel free. But essentially, is I think if I had to bring it down, it's the carbon price at this point on the way Vale is going. Influencing somehow the product mix or the plans for product mix to be less carbon intensive? Is this the ultimate goal, or is it really in a sort of earlier stage and hasn't really reached that? You could.
Yeah, sure. So we are analyzing how to define internal carbon price, which should be a part of the commitment for Vale after 2020 to evolve the current commitment that we have in climate change. And what we are working right now is to reduce the scope 1 emissions. And as I told you, for a mining company, this is not the most significant scope in terms of GHG emissions. We are aware that scope 1 and 2, because we have the main operations in Brazil, where we have an energy matrix, electricity matrix, very clean. We have a scope 2 also very small compared to other mining companies that operate otherwise in the world. But scope 3 emissions, which is related to the use of our product, is very relevant. And what we can do to manage those emissions directly and do our best is to improve our quality of our product, which we have been successful, mainly due to the quality of iron ore in Brazil, and also reduce the maximum we can the emissions in the production and in the transportation of our product. So a carbon pricing mechanism will help this as well, because it will help operations to prioritize the emission reduction internally. And we are also working very close to clients to understand how better our product can be used to reduce emissions. We are already aware that we have a cleaner product compared to the others in the market, which helps to reduce a little the emissions in the furnaces, for example. But there is a lot of discussions to be done in this arena already. And something that we also follow very close is the regulation of carbon pricing in China, which we are keen to see the announcement of a national carbon pricing being started later this year.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to bring up a question that maybe we did not address at the beginning, and it's probably it's a good time to stop and address it. Is really a couple of viewers they want to understand the difference between participating in the ETS simulation and applying an internal carbon price, right? So which is so I don't know, Luis or Fabio, either of you want to address this? Or?
I would say that through the simulation of carbon market, concerning actual emission data and detailed auction information, I think for us, we have the opportunity to get closer to other companies so that the challenge and impacts of real ETS shall work, also create a coalition among these companies. In addition, it is predictable to evaluate possible carbon price scenarios for a business model. So I would say that, for in our business, real carbon pricing and all this modeling, it's really making the difference here in the way of doing business and the way we predict the future for the company and the other business that we are going to be in. That's I would like to comment on that.
Fabio, you want to add anything or?
Yeah. I think that both contribute to a deeper understanding inside the bank of how climate change impacts the finance, investment, and insurance industries. And just to get an idea, because of this new universe around the carbon, for this year we are reviewing our position of climate change and bringing sensibilization workshops to the different areas and managers, and including this carbon pricing in our units of business in the bank. So it's a process that we name that's learning by doing, but this is very relevant now in Itaú because of the importance that we discover operating this system. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, and please, to you. There is another question that has come up, which is really: is there a relationship between your internal carbon price and carbon credits or offsets? I mean, if there is one, and then the other question that is related to this is whether your company buy carbon credits or offsets. That's I don't know. Phil, anyone wants to?
I can start.
Right.
So by now we are not buying credits, we are not offsetting emissions. Our main strategy is to look for a reduction of our direct emissions, which is the one we can manage. So we are accounting now, we have improved our methodology for GHG emissions accounting to include how much we emit and how much we remove of GHG when we do a deforestation or when we recuperate land, so to have this evolution. And we also have projects under the CDM mechanism, which we used to sell them in the past, and now we are not selling anymore because it's also part of our strategy to keep the credits and use it internally to account for our emission reductions. And we faced some problem in the past to have more CDM projects because of the additionality and to prove that projects were not economically feasible, in other words, but we were able to realize a third-part independent auditing, so we can have letters of assurance that we reduced emissions, for example, changing fuels in the pelletizing plants. So.
Luis, any views?
No, just to mention that here at CPFL, we avoid 4.5 to 5 times more than we generate in terms of CO2 emissions. So I would say that, as Vivian mentioned, we are not negotiating at this point. We are just keeping our books. And so, it's important to say we're not trading. So it's important to say that we hope for the enhancement of carbon pricing in the near future.
From
Yep.
Yeah. We have a strategy of report and reduction emissions and offsetting, and the price of the carbon is certainly part of this offsetting account. but we have also products to do the trade of the carbon. But now we are not doing trading. We are not operating this yet. But we have everything in the desk to start over time.
And Fabio, since I got you there, there is a question, and I think you addressed it before, but I wanted to check those. The question is whether Itaú incorporates carbon pricing in when it assesses credit risk.
Yeah, we are looking for our portfolio, our loan portfolio, and the view is a sectorial view to discover which sector is more intensive in carbon and which sector is more important or relevant for the bank to act, and how we are exposed in the sector in the carbon emissions in Brazil. And we are looking and analyzing what to do to move it toward a low carbon portfolio. When we go inside the sector, we compare each company, and we can know which company is more effective in mitigation or is low carbon emission, and what we can do to move the sector in the same direction. On the other hand, we are looking for the ratings of the companies, and we are looking at how to introduce carbon as a variable to check the rating of the companies, and how we can help these companies to go to a scenario of a low carbon emissions.
Thank you. We'll move. We'll move to I think we're getting towards the end of the session, and I wanted to ask you. You've had all these interactions among the different companies and with the Brazilian government, right? So I wanted to get your views on whether you think the efforts that different private companies are having undertaking are, making a difference or are influencing policymakers or not. So it's really, now we are going to the interface between the private sector and the policymaking. I wanted to get your views. Maybe I will start with Luis, and then move on to Vivian, and then to Fabio.
Well, in Brazil, the issue has been highlighted since it represents an opportunity for the Brazilian economy. Whose electrical metrics, mostly renewable, is a comparative advantage compared to other countries. The government coordinates a working committee to guide Brazilian actions on the issue and to study carbon pricing. Initiative supported by the World Bank through the Partnership with Market Readiness, PMR. It's a forum of countries and international organization that seeks to promote carbon pricing systems. The expansion for publishing the carbon pricing studies will be in 2018. The government is, very supportive at this point. I would say we are all the time interacting and in contact with government officials. And after all these interactions with also society, the bill will be submitted to approve, I believe, in 2019, and the ETS will run in 2020. So first of all, I think it's, the participation of government is essential, is key. They have been very cooperative. I may say all the companies that we have relations, not only in the electrical sector, but other sectors are really working hard towards the government. And, even though we are going through this turmoil in Brazil at this point, we still believe that, we are really fully committed with these targets to be run in 2020, and the government has been crucial in this process. That's my point.
Okay, and Vivian, any views on or quickly before we...
I may just add that additional way that we contribute is that, for example, the organizers of the ETS simulation in Brazil is also part of the board of the PMR, so they are helping to provide technical advices when needed. So I understand that this is some way where we can contribute to the national policy discussion. And also the other publications that government do regarding the issue, it is always in a public consultation phase, then we can contribute towards. And there is a lot of different private company initiatives that is also very well received from the government. So I think I just want to add this to what Luis Osorio has just said.
All right, and in the Fabio, any quick addition to that before I have another burning question to address? But any views?
Yeah, we are participating with discussions and presenting our views and experiences on the subject with the government, with many different ministries. There are many studies and tools of carbon being analyzed by the Brazilian government for a long time, and we are together with them presenting our view as a bank and our view with FEBRABAN as a sectorial strategy. And certainly we are not the only players heard by the government, but we have had place for this constructive dialogue with the government. So I think it's a positive way.
Great. I think we are getting really to the end, and I wanted to give you a last chance to go around the different participants. I wanted to press you on. I wanted to ask one specific question, and then I also wanted you to address what are the next steps in terms of the ETS, or in your, both related to the ETS, but also on your carbon pricing efforts within your companies. And so in addition to the next steps, I wanted you to address whether, these initiatives that you have on carbon pricing, are they having an impact on reducing emissions? This is something that has been coming up as a question from several viewers. The question is very blunt, are these initiatives bringing down carbon emissions or not? So I wanted you to address that and also talk about the next steps. Let's do it let's start by Itaú, then CPFL, and then we finalize with Vale, if possible. Go ahead, Fabio.
If I can define the next step for this important initiative, I think that would be the engagement of more companies that now is out of the initiative in the simulator, and the sensibility for the carbon price initiatives, and the exchange of experience and methodologies, because it is very important that all the sectors, all the economy go together in the same direction, understanding and proposing different ways to enhance this issues of carbon emissions and the carbon pricing.
Luis?
We believe that the market and the companies have a fundamental role to address the solutions against the climate change. Therefore, we promote discussions through sectoral groups, establishing a statement to push the government to be more ambitious in implementing the NDC's mechanisms. I would say that's very important for Itaú, Vale, and many other companies to support the government in implementing the NDC's mechanisms in Brazil.
Thank you. Vivian?
Yeah, so the simulation, as it is still a simulation and there is no real money flows, I would not say that it will help. It is helping the business units to reduce emissions, but as Luis already said, I think this is helping to increase awareness of the high level of the company to understand the importance of a carbon pricing. And it is also helping companies to better understand the technical way to introduce a carbon pricing within the company. And that will help to reduce emissions in the business units, because translating emissions into a carbon pricing and into cost helps a lot business units to understand the climate change issue. So in these terms, indirectly, I think the simulation is helping business units to reduce emissions. There is still a lot of work to be done, but the increase of awareness is one of the main points of this initiative right now.
Vivian, just if I may, when you talk about a lot of work to be done in terms of the initiative, can you provide some concrete things that are the sort of that still needs to be done?
Yeah, sure. I can provide some examples of what we are working internally. So by now we are trying to go as close as we can to the business unit and explain to them what is climate change issue, and what are the opportunities to reduce emissions, and what are the costs. So we are working on the development of a marginal abatement cost, which is nothing different from a list of the emission reduction opportunities and their costs, and we rank them and understand what is the best approach for every business unit to reduce emissions. I have never seen a company which adopted internal carbon pricing mechanisms as an ETS. There is also as a tax. We prefer to work within the companies with a tax. But when we were working with the government or regulatory framework, usually we prefer ETS because it stimulates efficiency. So what we are working now within the company, as I said before, and I think that are next steps necessary for implementing a robust carbon pricing, and not only for investment decision, but also for operational day-to-day budget cycle, for example, and strategy, is that we need to have a marginal abatement cost for units, so they can understand what is the real risk of reducing emissions internally or being in compliance with regional carbon pricing mechanisms. They will be aware to understand if it's cheaper to reduce internally, or if it's cheaper to buy credits or just pay fee if there is the case of having a tax in place.
Very good. Thank you very much. I think that's pretty clear. I think to dispel any preconceived ideas about Brazilian punctuality, we are fine. We are exactly at the hour, so we should probably wrap it up here. I wanted to thank Vivian, Luis, and Fabio for the candor, for the transparency, and for sharing the experiences. I think there are many keywords that we could gather from this, from governance to awareness to cultural change to exploration, and it's essentially testing ideas, and it's a long-term, or it's a marathon run. To the viewers, I want to thank you for putting your questions on, of course for attending. If there is any burning question that was not addressed, I'm sure you will find a way to get to the organizers, and we'll try to have it responded. So with that, I want to thank the organizers, the participants, and the viewers for this. We will and congratulate those of you in Brazil that are in this initiative for a very bold approach to really try to develop a workable solution on the private side, right? So with that, thank you everyone for this wonderful session. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this opportunity.